Hey everybody! So last week, actually it was 2 weeks ago, because of Thanksgiving vacation, we talked about auto briefs and briefs in general. The original name of the class was actually just going to be all about Mark Kislingbury briefs that I learned during some recent conventions that I went to. They stuck with me and I thought that they were great. But I decided to shift the focus. Instead of just being generally about briefs that I find useful, let's talk about an Eclipse specific feature, which is the auto brief. I'm going to cover very briefly what I did share in class, which was an assortment of these images that are both kind of like diagrams I made, as well as a few are scanned from somewhere else. So I'm just going to open up so you can have a sense of what we discussed. Of course, when we talk about briefs, it can always be really intimidating for anyone, whether beginner or pretty advanced, to embrace them because, you've gone so long without it, you think, wow, I'm going to have to relearn all this. So just take it with a grain of salt. But what I did is I actually mimicked Kislingbury's method in his presentation. In his presentations, what he does is that he actually has a picture of the steno keyboard, and then he shows you where your fingers would go. It's really interesting, and I think it's much more effective than just saying what the letters actually are in the steno outline. So we first talked a little bit about the and, because, and but left-hand beginner phrases. Couple, and a couple of. That's amazing. I love this. There's a lot you can build off of. Oh, my absolute favorite. Who did you? What did you? When did you? Where did you? And why did you? This saves me so much hassle in QA. So I really was excited to share that. Next, these are actually two scans that are from the Ed Varallo's book, Shorthand for the 21st Century. This is something that people are mostly familiar with. He's really familiar. I don't recall, and I can't recall, I don't remember, but his list was so extensive. I just wanted to show people, look how much further you can take this if you just give it a shot. So these are pretty familiar, but on the next page, oh my God, I mean, these are really unique. So that's something that you could consider. Love this family. It's a slight adaptation from what I learned from Kislingbury, but it utilizes his very famous right-hand phrase enders. In this case, it is the told me, told you. So it could be I told me, I guess that would make sense, but you told me, he told me, she told me, and then I didn't do anything on the left hand because that's all for the first pronoun, and then the told, and then the finger radiates out, the pinky radiates out to do the variety of other pronouns to end this phrase. Let's see, and the last one is the try to family. Pretty straightforward. True is for try to, add the S for tries to, D for tried to, and trying to. So that's all I wanted to cover really quickly when it came to the briefs that I learned. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to look at something that is specific to Eclipse. Case Catalyst has its equivalent, but in Eclipse, we're going to be looking at something called auto brief. Now, as a student, you may have already come across this, and I'm just going to show you where you can find all the information relating to it. When you open up user settings, go over to real time, because it's a very real-time sort of function that you would be using in real time to help you real time, make you a better writer, make everything come out a lot nicer. On this tab, you're going to go down and you're going to see auto brief, and you should probably have a check marked, and then the settings button. Just to give you a little disclaimer, I'm going to open this settings up. This might look different if you're not on version 7. They made a few changes to what appears here and in what order, but essentially it is going to be the same. But what we're going to be doing is I first want to talk about what is autobrief, how does it appear here in your transcript, how you can use it, and then essentially a breakdown of what all of these things mean. So starting off, I was dabbling around trying to force a variety of briefs and autobrief to kick in as I did this really crappy little transcript. No real significance, just repeating a lot of phrases. And what I did end up with at the end, I'm pretty glad, is we have a variety of colors here. Now what these mean is, actually I'm going to simultaneously show you under my display, here they are. These last three relate anything having to do with the briefs or autobrief. It's not in the same order exactly, but the first one at the top are the reminder briefs. For me, it's orange. These are actually briefs. These are strokes inside of my dictionary already. So if you're going about writing and you write something out in 2 or 3 strokes when you actually have 1, then it's just going to remind you, hey, you actually have something shorter in your dictionary that you should be using. So these will actually look really familiar to you. The green one stands for requested briefs. Now, if you recall from the last lesson on macros, we finished up the lesson talking about a macro that forces Eclipse and prompts it for a brief. So obviously these are green as requested briefs because I requested Eclipse take these last 1 word, 2 word, or 3 words and give me a brief for it. So I was going crazy with the happy baby bar, trying to prompt it to give me something. I actually asked accidentally for the past 4 words, so it gave me go happy baby bar, but down here we have happy baby bar, which is this little brief that it suggested here. The last one are the pink ones. This stands for just normal briefs, and this is what Eclipse comes up with as it's noticing your writing, and maybe it notices that you're writing a particular word or phrase many times over and it's taking a lot of strokes. Well, it's going to assume that you might want to shorten that down. We're going to be talking next about how we can tweak how these appear, how long does it take until they appear, and also what sorts of brief suggestions it's going to give you based off of what works really well for you. So now that we know what these all stand for, remember these are the reminder briefs, the requested briefs, and the normal briefs. Let's take a look back at the U real-time auto brief settings. Now before I actually open this, make sure that if you want to utilize auto brief, this has to be clicked. This has to have a check mark in it. Otherwise, essentially it'll disappear after a while and none of this will work. So you have it all set up. Let's go inside of settings. What are we looking at here? Number 1, suggest briefs automatically after how many occurrences? For example, in my little practice session, I was writing happy baby bar several times to sort of prompt it. And it took 2 times of that repetitive writing out that it said, all right, I'm going to start suggesting some briefs. The second one, if you have it selected, you're essentially giving yourself 1 extra step before you can accept a brief that's been suggested to you. This will pop up, a suggested brief will appear, but until you have written a require accept stroke, which is not going to be covered how to do that in this lesson, then you would then have to put the accept stroke to say, yes, I like that one. It opens up the gates. This, for example, this one in the middle might become available to you, and only after you've put the accept stroke and you start writing it will it kick in. Now, if you don't have it accepted, if you don't have this selected, what this means is that as soon as it appears here, if your fingers hit it, whether on accident or otherwise, that's going to pop up. Now, if you're like me, I'm going to be honest that maybe for a year, I actually had this, I had the entire thing turned off, or mostly I think I had the accept stroke put on because I was getting really frustrated by the kinds of briefs that it was suggesting to me were so commonplace or were so easy for me to hit by accident. I would end up getting all this sort of gobbledygook that I didn't mean for, and a lot of repeated phrases that I didn't want. But now that I know how to use it, and I know how to make auto brief work for me better, there's no reason to have this selected. Having it marked as an untrans means that when it appears, if you then do use a suggested brief, and it appears in your display, right here in your transcript, it's actually going to look, in my case, dark purple, which stands for an untranslate. Just bring more attention to you in case you want to double check that. Archiving all of the suggested briefs, I don't know why I turned this off, it could be a good idea, is that there's actually a dictionary called, oh my gosh, I forget what it's called. It should come with your Eclipse when you have the program, and it will just essentially store all of the possible suggested briefs that it gave you. Allowing numbers means that you can then prompt Eclipse to give you a brief for dates, which is super awesome, maybe large patent numbers or amounts of money. So that's always important. Using the Kislingbury suggestions, as it sounds, any of the suggested briefs is actually going to be drawing from the Kislingbury theory and dictionary that's embedded within Eclipse. Very intimidating, but maybe you like it. You're gonna love it then. These numbers are pretty important. Okay, thankfully these actually do correspond to the position that they're here. This number says how many of these suggestions are you going to display. I have a maximum of 6 reminders, 6 requests, and 8 suggestions. Wow. There's no right or wrong answer to these numbers. It just basically means how many do you want to have displayed. You saw in other instances if I click, okay, I can't click out here, but if I'm elsewhere and there's more information, everything just kind of gets shoved down. But, well, that's what those numbers mean. Minimum keys, okay. Minimum keys means the minimum number of keys that are going to be as part of the suggested auto brief. I have mine as 3, so here's an example. It's going to have a minimum of PH, which actually stands for 1 key, because the program knows that's an M, then the asterisk, and then, okay, there's actually, well, a minimum of 3. There's certainly a minimum. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 of them. The minimum reminder savings, this number, I needed a reminder of what it meant. It essentially means if you are writing something and let's say it takes you 3 strokes, you are open to more suggestions popping up so long as it saves you even 1 stroke. So if I'm writing something in 3 and it's going to, or even 2, I think. Let's say I write something in 2, all these autobriefs are pretty much going to be 1 or 2 strokers depending on how you define your parameters for the kind of autobriefs that pop up. But that's what that means. And the maximum phrase words, it's supposed to be pretty self-explanatory. I'm kind of forgetting right now, so I won't get into that. These are more self-explanatory. The pop-up window means that rather than it being embedded in the info bar only, it will actually pop up as this sort of like yellow box right around here. I don't like that. I find it a bit distracting. Info bar means it's going to be here, and to show the briefs phonetically means that rather than it being PH as the keys, it'll actually appear as an M. This is a little bit tricky because it can conflict with some other programming inside of Eclipse. So for that reason alone, I suggest that you not touch it. The font. This is where you could, this is kind of silly that it even has this here, to be honest, because I find that the information we had on the display tab, as you recall, with the breakdown of what these are with the different colors, that's more so what dictates it. But at the very least, you can increase the size, maybe not the color, but make it bold and really pop out. Now at this point, I do want to say that something that's interesting I've seen working reporters do is that they'll have, in addition to their screen on their laptop or their portable computer, they're going to have an additional screen that comes off onto the side, and it's reserved solely for showing these. So they take it out of the info bar, have it as a pop-up window, and then move it over to this extra peripheral screen. And it's great because just with a simple glance and all these bright colors, they know what it means. They can then say, oh, I really like that. It's going to save me a lot of trouble. Whenever a happy baby bar pops up 20 times in this transcript, then it's a really convenient way to organize the information on their screen. The last thing I want to talk about is how to, again, kind of be stricter about the kinds of autobriefs that you're going to be receiving. So back inside the autobrief settings, there are 2 buttons that I skipped over. The ineligible words, I gotta admit, I don't even know what that means, so I'm not going to cover it. But the theory settings button, very important. Inside of here is where you're going to make a list of basically the parameters of how you want the autobriefs to be formulated by Eclipse. This doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, but the negative sign means never do something, whether it's never have an A in it or never have an asterisk in it. But in my case, I have never have and then have a space. Can you tell? That just means don't give me a double stroke. But the plus sign means always give me. So always give me an asterisk. And you'll notice that, and this is what's affecting these suggested briefs, this is where you have an asterisk here, here, and here. Because I don't use the asterisk so much, and it helps to differentiate that I'm not going to accidentally click this one. I said never give me a final SD. That's really hard to do. Never give me a TZ, and I hate these finger combinations. Notice that they're not phonetic. You have to have the actual keystrokes, P and B for the final N. So I said never give me these things. And it's really useful because now the kinds of suggestions it gives me are one that it's going to be easier for me to touch down and write on my keyboard. Even looking at this now, I just don't like the look of that one for one reason or another. Maybe I would be so inspired to say, you know what? I'm going to go into my theory settings and say, never give me PH, like that. But I'm not going to do it because I'm okay with that for now. That's a really important thing. I think of all of these things, understanding what they do is great, but understanding the theory settings for autobrief is going to help you to, again, encourage and tell Eclipse exactly the kinds of autobriefs that you want. They're going to be easier for you to remember, easy to implement without mistake. Yeah, and they're really great. So that's essentially everything that I want to talk about with autobriefs. They are really powerful. You'll probably be using them a lot more when you're actually on the job, but it never hurts to find out early as a student how they essentially work. So thank you so much and happy autobriefing.